Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Sanam Rastegar, and I'm on the Biden campaign's finance team. I want to thank you all so much for your generosity, your time, and your support. We are very honored to be organizing this very special event with our veterans, military families, and allies, and to be joined by our special guests, Mayor Pete Buttigieg, Senator Tammy Duckworth, and Commander Sean Skelly. I'd like to introduce Leo Cruz to kick things off for us today. Leo is the Biden campaign's Veterans and Military Families Engagement Director. Leo, over to you.
Thanks, Sanam. Thanks, everybody, for being here this afternoon. As it was stated, I'm the new Veterans and Military Families Engagement Director. I'm a Navy veteran and a former Obama administration appointee in the Department of Defense. And we are grateful to be joined by so many wonderful friends to Joe Biden here today. And I have the first honor and pleasure of introducing our moderator for this afternoon's discussion, Commander Sean Skelly, U.S. Navy retired. Sean served on active duty in the U.S. Navy for 20 years as an NFO, a naval flight officer, where she flew the S-3 Viking. And in her final tour was attached to the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab. Sean served as director of Marine Corps Improvised Explosive Device, or IED, Working Group, which is a very important project. And then after a period in industry, Sean joined the Obama administration in 2013 as the first and to date only transgender veteran to be appointed by the President of the United States. She first served as a special assistant to the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisitions, Technology, and Logistics, ATL, at the Department of Defense, and ultimately a director of the Office of the Executive Secretary at the Department of Transportation. In 2017, President Obama appointed Sean to serve as commissioner on the National Commission on Military, National, and Public Service, which delivered its final report to Congress this past March, making recommendations to strengthen all forms of service to address the nation's domestic and national security needs, invigorate civil society, and to strengthen our democracy. And I suggest you go read that report. She was recognized as one of the group of transgender veterans in the 2017 Out 100. In 2019, Sean helped found Out in National Security, a great nonprofit advocacy organization dedicated to raising the profile of LGBTQ+ Americans, serving all aspects of national security, seeking to connect them and help to facilitate pipelines to ensure current and future generations of patriotic LGBTQ+ Americans can serve with dignity and respect due to all of who protect our nation. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Sean.
Thank you, Leo. I'm grateful to take part in this event and to help make Vice President Joe Biden the 46th president of the United States and our next commander-in-chief. And I'd like to briefly focus on that second title and why it's so important in this election. My career has been sort of a tweener. I was commissioned under Ronald Reagan at the tail end of the Cold War. I learned my trade in the unipolar Pax Americana decade, closed it out in the upheaval of the start of the War on Terror, and now in my graying, if you can't tell, years as a civilian, the transition to this era of great power competition that we find ourselves in, or whatever you like to call it. But it wasn't until this past 3.5 years that I was able to conceive of, let alone actually think the thoughts, that a commander-in-chief wouldn't acknowledge, embrace, and own the responsibility to the United States and to me or other service members performing their duty. Whether for me that was hundreds of miles south of the Falklands over an ocean you wouldn't survive in if you had to leave the jet, or over Mogadishu during Restore Hope, or flying Southern Watch missions in the first strikes after Desert Storm, or over the South China Sea when China first started to assert itself, and what we now see is, some aggressive strategic maneuvers, or when I hit the tarmac as a civilian in Kabul. I could never think that a commander-in-chief wasn't all in, embracing the responsibility to the nation, or to me and my shipmates and squadron mates while we served our fellow Americans, including the obligation to us after we finished serving. It was never a possibility. But where are we today? If I dared to joke, I'd say we're living the script that was thrown back in the faces of the writers of the TV show 24. And they were told, wait, stop, make it more believable. No one would accept a president this corrupt, duplicitous, self-serving, and antithetical to their oath, not even as a plot device. But here we are as a nation. Our service members and families, veterans and families, are living the abrogation of that duty and the refutation of that oath of office almost every day, with the destruction of our alliances and our international standing. The latest example being the the still wet decision to severely alter our force posture in Germany, which is really just another muffin in the gift basket to Russia, or the cavalier disregard for the VA and its charge to our veterans, taking manifestations from a trio of unqualified men who literally pay the president dues every year as they pass him suggestions in the line for the waffle bar at Mar-a-Lago that are then passed on to the VA for action. It's unconscionable. And meanwhile, that VA tested hydroxychloroquine on our veterans without an approved trial. To date, 2,000 veterans under VA care have passed from COVID-19, 17 a day. And they're counted among the 150,000 Americans who have died thus far, overwhelmingly through ineptitude. There's been a manifest erosion in the public trust of our chain of command and the proper role of our military. The intervention in the military justice system in the case of war crimes convictions, the neutering of his own often unqualified leaders in the civilian chain of command, to wit, the USS Theodore Roosevelt episode of COVID-19, the employment of our National Guard on the streets of America for fear-mongering and political theater, taking our service members away from readiness training, putting them and keeping them on the southern border while robbing the DoD budget to pay for an unnecessary vanity project of a wall. The list is just going to keep getting longer, and the dangers won't stop and grow more fraught until we get to November 3rd and vote for a leader who believes that oath to be the sacred obligation we need it to be, one who acts on behalf of all of us as a nation, with care for the lives and the well-being of all of those who protect us, those women and men and their families, and deserve our unfailing support once their watch ends. Both of our speakers this afternoon have lived that oath as service members and as elected leaders. It's now my pleasure to introduce the first of them. U.S. Senator Tammy Duckworth is an Iraq War veteran, Purple Heart recipient, Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, who was among the first handful of Army women to fly combat missions during Operation Iraqi Freedom. Senator Duckworth served in the Reserve Forces for 23 years, retiring at the rank of Lieutenant Colonel in 2014. She was elected to the Senate in 2016 after representing Illinois' 8th Congressional District in the House of Representatives for 2 terms. Personally, few leaders have been as present, as visible, as passionately invested in the defense of service members and veterans, and in ensuring Vice President Biden becomes the next president of the United States than Senator Duckworth. I'll selfishly take this moment to say how much I personally appreciated listening to her remarks last year in the Pentagon courtyard during Pentagon Pride. So please, everyone, please welcome Senator Tammy Duckworth.
Hi, everybody. It's so great to be here. Sean, thank you for your remarks. I think you hit the nail right on the head with all of the failures of this administration, and thank you for saying such nice things about me. That was a great day in the Pentagon courtyard. It was a beautiful, sunshiny day, and it was actually a day of hope and joy, which I thought was quite amazing. You know, we've had so few of those type of days under this president and this commander-in-chief. I'm going to talk a little bit about what a Joe Biden administration will do for us and do for our military. First and foremost, we are talking about a military family. People think of the Bidens and they forget that they are a military family. And so they understand the pressures of military families, of deployments. They watch their son be deployed. They watch his children be without their dad. And, you know, and then of course, all the work that Dr. Biden herself has done with the Joining Forces initiative with Mrs. Obama over the years. I got to work with them, on everything from ending predatory lending that targets especially our young enlisted personnel, to the spouses that are left behind trying to hold things together while the service member is deployed. And then we worked on veterans homelessness at the VA, and all sorts of great works that are done there, and all of their support for our wounded warriors. So first and foremost, what we get with a Biden administration is a military family that understands military families and the pressures on them. And we will also get, first and foremost, of course, is a commander-in-chief who knows how to be a commander-in-chief and who truly, deeply cares about our military men and women. All of us who have led troops know that our number one job is to make sure that we take care of the safekeeping and the well-being and the training of our troops so that they can go out and carry out the mission. If you don't care for your troops and you don't make sure that they're well-trained, well-equipped, and that their families are well cared for, then you know that their minds will be distracted and they will not be fully equipped and capable of doing the missions and carrying out the very dangerous jobs that Americans ask them to do on behalf of our national security. And you will know that President Biden will be someone who truly understands that. And that's not something we have in this commander-in-chief right now. He's someone who has continued to politicize the military, everything from using National Guard helicopters to suppress peaceful protesters in Lafayette Square, well, let's not talk about him. Let's talk about Joe Biden, shall we? Because I'm tired of talking about Trump and all of his failures. I want to talk about the fact that Joe Biden would not be afraid to call up Vladimir Putin as soon as he had read that there were bounties that Russia had put on American troops' heads. Joe Biden would actually have launched an investigation into whether or not any of the woundings and deaths of American servicemen and women in Afghanistan in the past 18 months are connected to bounties put on our troops by the Russians. Joe Biden will actually make sure that our veterans are taken care of once they leave active duty by renewing the promise of the VA, by making sure that we update many of the programs at the VA that have been allowed to languish, everything from the HUD Bash VA program to end homelessness with those grants that are given so veterans don't have to end up on the streets of our cities, to making sure that veterans when they're receiving community care get the highest standards of community care access and quality of health care that they would get at the VA. And then of course we've had the tragedies and the scandals of military housing and our military men and women on bases having to live in housing that is substandard, even as we're paying millions and millions of dollars to contractors who are not fixing those housing, not providing adequate housing for our military families, whether they're with special needs or just plain housing that don't have mold in them, for crying out loud. This has been included in Joe Biden's plan for what he will do for our military family members. He's also talked about establishing cultural competency training so that in VA facilities and community care settings where veterans might seek care will be equipped to support the needs of our LGBTQ+ veterans, and that also our female veterans in the women's health clinics are also, their needs are also addressed as well. And then of course we have to reverse the Department of Defense recent policies that perpetuate the stigmatization of and discrimination against people living with HIV. There's so much on the long list of things that Joe Biden is going to have to do. And that's why having each and every one of you in his corner is so very important. As I've been saying recently, it's important to be Team Biden. Doesn't matter what position you play on the team, but we all got to show up because Joe Biden is going to have to dig us out of so many crises that this nation is facing, whether it's COVID-19, whether it is our economic downturn, whether it is an ascendant communist PRC that is confronting U.S. interests in this Asia-Pacific region, whether it is Russia putting bounties on American troops' heads. Excuse me. He's going to have to deal with racism that exists in our military as well as in our police forces. You know, we have to promote greater diversity in our military, and then we have to make sure that people can reach the upper levels of leadership in our military so that we can see greater diversity and representation at all levels. I'm actually coughing because it's very dry in this room. So I may just wrap up by saying, you know, we have a lot of work to do. Joe's going to need all of us. He needs us to get him into office, and he needs us there once he's in office. And I know so many of you have served before, and so many of you are ready to serve. And again, it's one team, one fight, Team Biden. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mayor Pete, someone who, just as each and every one of you knows, has served, understands the needs of our troops and the needs of diversity in our military, and also the need to reestablish the highest codes of conduct for our military, beginning with the Commander-in-Chief. Pete?
Well, thanks so much, Senator. First of all, I just want to express my admiration for Senator Duckworth for her leadership, her service. We are so lucky as a country And the Midwest is proud, and certainly the community of American veterans is proud for the way that you stick up every day for what is right. And so glad that I have a chance to be part of this event with you. Thank you, Sean, for your service in and out of uniform, and for the clarity of what you just expressed, reminding us just why we need a change in the White House. I'll be very brief because I know we have some Q&A planned too, and I'm excited to be in dialogue with folks on the call. I'll just say this. I've been thinking a lot lately about the theme and the issue of trust. Trust in our institutions is in trouble right now. Trust in each other is in trouble in this country right now. And yet one of the best ways to develop trust is to look to the military, because the act of signing up, commissioning or enlisting, is an exchange of trust between an American and the country that they belong to. The country trusts that individual with a tremendous amount of responsibility, often out of proportion with any other level of responsibility that would be offered to somebody of that age and that experience, and then provides them with the training and readiness to bear that responsibility well. And in return, each service member trusts the United States, trusts their chain of command to take seriously that command and to always look after them, both during and after their time in uniform. And no matter which party was in charge, there has been an expectation that that trust would be implicit, has to be implicit, in order for service members even to be able to do their job. And yet here we are at a moment when the military has been politicized, where service members and veterans have been disrespected, where there is no regard from the highest office in the land for what military families and veterans go through, and for the integrity of the uniform itself. Whether we're talking about the ways that the military has and military assets have been turned against Americans exercising their rights, the way the president speaks about veterans, punishing war heroes and rewarding war criminals, or the simple fact that in this country we can no longer expect that decisions will be made without regard to politics. All of this has to change. And the best way to change it is to have somebody in that office who understands that the purpose of the presidency is not the glorification of the president. It is about service. It is about bringing the American people together. And in that commander-in-chief role, it's about doing right by those who serve. You know, I'm just about the most junior person on this call when it comes to the military side. I have to say, however proud I am of our campaign, it's a little heady for a reserve sailor whose career topped out at 03 to be with a U.S. senator, people with this many stars in the mix, and even the former secretary who I think signed both my paycheck and my orders. But one of the things that any officer knows is best symbolized in the tradition that officers eat last in the chow hall or underway. I think right now the president is the kind of guy who would push enlisted people out of the way to get to the buffet line first. We need a president who understands that this office is about service, about what you can do for your country. And throughout his career, in his time in office, but also from the simple fact that he is from a military family, Joe Biden understands that. He understands it through and through. And he is going to be able not only to implement the best policies that the senator was describing, not only to be a capable administrator, and actually manage this country and its emergencies well, but even more than the policy and the management functions of the presidency and the policy and management responsibilities of command, he will do what every great commander does, which is set the tone, establish the culture, call the American people together in a way that makes every service member proud of that American project that we're all part of. That intuition that isn't written down anywhere in the formal description of the job of the President of the United States is the thing I think we are missing the most. And one of the reasons I most look forward to being part of the American project under the presidency of Joe Biden. I know I'm preaching to the choir on that, but I also want to remind everybody here that while if the election were held today, we'd be in pretty good shape, we've also been reminded in the bluntest possible terms just how much can change in a matter of 3 or 4 months, which is how long we have between now and election day. World historical events don't tend to come in ones and twos. And frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if we faced at least one major national security event between now and November. And who knows what that could do to our politics here at home. all the more reason for us to come together as we're doing right now and resolve to put as much time and talent and treasure as possible toward making sure that we get the president that our American troops, veterans, and their families deserve. And that's why I'm so glad to be with you. So with that, I will turn it over back to Sean to guide this event. And thanks again, Sean, for all that you've done for us in and out of uniform.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yeah, it is a very it's a very naval call. Like I'm grateful for that comfort factor. Soldiers kind of make me uneasy. All respect, Senator. So now we're on to the questions and answers. The first up will be from Tanya Bradshaw.
Great. Thank you so much. What advice do you have for the next generation of public servants who over the years have lost trust and faith in government to be able to make our communities more just and vibrant?
I mean, I would say serve. The first step is serve. Find a way to serve, and you don't have to serve, the way we did by picking up a rifle and putting on a uniform. You can serve in so many ways. You can serve by volunteering at your local public library, helping to tutor kids whose mom can't homeschool them right now. And you can actually help homeschool these kids even virtually. There's so much that can be done, and I think we have right now generations of people who have not been called to serve, and I think that's the first step. Is you gain so much more from serving than you ever give up in volunteering. And what I would just say to folks, just start by serving. One thing will lead to another, and maybe one day you'll end up running for office as well. Usually, once you start serving, you get roped into more things, I think.
Senator, that's actually scientific fact that it does. People are more likely, once they get it once, they get a taste for it. Mr. Mayor.
That's right. Now, the only thing I could add to that is that we've got to make the system more worthy of trust. And the only way to do that is to use every power that we have. And our moment of greatest power is the moment that you walk in to the polling place. I just heard a little bit of President Obama's moving remarks at the service for Representative Lewis. And it was a call to action to use that power of the vote. That's where it all begins. And from that simple service that is due of every citizen to serving in uniform, serving in the community, or serving in office, the more you put into the system, the more it will become worthy of that trust, and the better we can make it together.
We senators were all in the cloakroom. So there's a little back room to the floor of the Senate. We were in between two votes, and all the Democrats were crammed into our little cloakroom watching the president. At the end of it, one of the senators said, "Remember what it was like to have a real president?" And we were all just like, "Oh, soon though, in under 100 days, we're gonna have a real president again." But yeah, it was so moving.
Can't come soon enough.
Yeah.
Next up, we have a question from Loretta Red from Santa Barbara.
I have to apologize. I didn't write it down. Do you have the question?
I do, Loretta. If you'd like, I'd be happy to read it.
If you would, Sean, I would appreciate that greatly. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. I'm doing Windows all day long here.
Okay.
So Loretta's question, what can we do to keep the U.S. military from being divided along ideological and political lines? Our uniforms symbolize one America, but it would seem President Trump has created internal strife amongst the troops and command. And thank you for that question, Loretta.
Thank you, Sean.
Well, you know what? This president has gone out of his way to find ways to divide us as a nation in every aspect, right? And including in the military. And what we need to do is provide people a reason and remind them of the reason why they're serving in the first place, and the core values of what we stand for, and all of your oaths of office, and letting people know, reminding them why they're serving in the first place. The thing about Joe Biden is he's the person that's going to find ways to bind us back together, to heal our nation's wounds and bring us back together, instead of being a guy who's actively looking and choosing to divide us. We're stronger when we come together. And in the military, we need to also have that greater diversity at all levels of leadership. It's really easy to divide us when people can look up and say, there's nobody like me in leadership. Nobody's listening to me. Nobody understands. But if there's diversity at all levels of service in our military and in our government, people can see a little of themselves in the institution, and that brings us back together as opposed to dividing us.
So well said. And the one thing that is on my mind when it comes to this politicization is that, you know, it was in the military more than any other organization I've been part of that I came to learn to trust and admire people who were radically different from me politically. That was part of what was so great about the opportunity to serve. Being put in charge of doing something hard under challenging conditions with people you've just met has a way of cutting through those ideological and political lines. And it's one of the reasons it's so tragic to see the politicization of the military that's going on right now. I draw hope from the fact that many, even very, very senior uniformed military leaders, some of whom have been sucked into this, have stepped back and sometimes in almost out of character ways. I mean, for the likes of General Mattis to weigh in on politics the way he felt compelled to do, shows you that there is some resilience in the ethos of service, even against this assault from above that's happening under this White House. We have an opportunity, if we have the right kind of leadership, to restore these norms and to make clear that we check our partisan hats at the door the moment that we enter an installation or put on that uniform, that's part of what makes this an institution that serves and represents the whole of America. And as the senator said, making sure that institution is diverse, especially in its top ranks, is a huge part of what it's going to take to make good on that promise.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The one thing I would add is it starts at the top. People are policy, and how you treat people and where you put those people, such as where the current president put the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff in an unimaginable position that shocked every one of us who saw them standing where they were standing on that day in DC and Lafayette Park, and then what redounded from there. But it starts with the leader setting the policy with who he chooses and how he employs those people. The next up is on our questions is Carl Chen from Universal City, Texas.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I wasn't really expecting to be on video. I did want to say thank you. It's an honor to be on with all of you. And Senator Duckworth, I've been a super huge fan since your epic takedown of Mr. Castillo a few years ago. You have led the way really in making sure that people don't abuse military and veteran status because it is such a trusted institution. I also didn't write my question down, but you guys have alluded to it at multiple points along the way. So the military, like any other organization in America right now, is facing a reckoning, right? We were having this national dialogue that is much needed on race relations in the United States. And you've touched on it again and again throughout this conversation in that when you look at the senior leadership of the DoD, it's pretty homogenous. And, you talk to especially, junior enlisted, junior officers, and they say, hey, these people don't look like me and they don't understand me. And, and I've seen it from both ends where, a young person will say, I'm in pain. And people senior to them say, I don't know what you're talking about. So you are correct. And I've been working with both, folks at the Pentagon and in veteran circles to come up with, policy solutions, how we can address not only recruiting, but retention and intentional development and advancement of underrepresented groups in the DoD. But what I wanted to get from both Senator Duckworth and Mayor Buttigieg, who I also have enormous respect for as a millennial, who did an amazing job this year. I wanted to get from you, what kind of policy proposals you might be thinking about that we could, conclusively push to make the DoD a more welcoming and inclusive place for all people. So that a young a young Arab American kid growing up in Metro Detroit can someday see himself as Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force or Chairman, and that's what I've got. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Go ahead. It's all you, man.
I just think it really does start with representation, and senior leadership is in a position to make that happen. First of all, by the appointment powers of the president, and make sure that the brass reflects the entire organization, and just as importantly reflects the country that is served. It means making sure that there are active efforts to recruit into civilian, senior civilian, as well as key appointed roles in uniform, those who represent all of us. And a lot of it has to do with making sure that we remove those vestiges that send a very different message. The fact that it remains controversial in 2020 that we would remove Confederate symbology and names that honor people who took up arms against the very military that has now been expected to honor them in name, shows you that we're not where we need to be, but we could be. These are policy choices. They're not set in stone, and we can make a difference there. We can make a difference by actively celebrating the contributions of those diverse communities that make up our fighting forces. And to take just one simple example, even as a sitting mayor, when I was on reserve duty, it was a pride display that I unexpectedly found in the lobby of the DIA when I was doing my annual training. That went a long way toward me feeling that I was ready to take the step of coming out. Those things add up. Those things matter, and that's the tone that is set and the decisions that are made by our elected officials. It's one of the reasons why we have a civilian leadership overseeing the branches, is to make sure that they reflect this country. But that means we got to make sure we got the right civilian leaders.
No, I agree. And I would say that some of the very concrete things that could be done right away as soon as Vice President Biden is sworn into office is something he's already committed to doing. And I mentioned it earlier, which is, for example, reversing the transgender military ban. That would go a long way towards increasing greater diversity and really helping people to progress in their careers as you go forward. And then, of course, as Mayor Peters said, appointing people to those appointed roles within the military that are diverse, that represent America. I remember two things in my military career that really struck out at me that gave me a lot of hope. One was when Colin Powell became the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and he was an ROTC grad. I was like, oh my God, you can be an ROTC grad and make it all the way to the top. Yay, And then when General Shinseki became the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and I looked at, this Asian American, it was like, okay, and his background, when he came from literally, a kid in Kauai, who, poor kid, and he made it. And so those for me were very, very much, transformative in my career as I was moving forward. And then when the first women were being allowed to fly combat mission, to me was transformative as well, and gave me hope and gave me energy to keep on going. We have to celebrate those moments, and we have to make sure more of those moments happen so that our military becomes as diverse as it possibly be. And let me just say, it's not just about feeling good and lefty liberal tendencies that I might have. It's about the strength of our nation. We are a global leader. If we want to go into Asia and stand up to the communist PRC and bring allies to our side to ensure freedom of navigation in the Asia Pacific region, if we want to stand up to the Russians, if we want to go into Africa, we need to have troops at all levels who can identify and understand culturally all of the folks from those cultures. It is much more meaningful when you can have an American soldier who speaks Thai show up at Operation Cobra Gold. It is so critically important that we have members of the Hawaii National Guard who speak Tagalog participate in exercises with the Filipino military when they're going after terrorist cells that are hiding out in those islands. It's important that we have folks who speak Swahili and are able to go into Africa and deal with local people. It makes our nation stronger when our government, when our military is diverse. And that's just good for America overall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Senator. And I'll just add for folks out there who might not have the right social media feeds and the like, but it was only this month in the latter half of the year 2020 that the Navy's first Black woman fighter pilot was created, successfully completing and about to be awarded her wings in training, where she'll go on to training likely as an F-18 pilot. Women have been fighter pilots in the US military and the Navy for 27 plus years, and it took 27 years to make a Black woman fighter pilot. So obviously we have a lot of work to do in there. And Carl, I think you mentioned it in posing your question. It goes all the way back to our communities, because they have to see people there, they have to find the trust and know that they're going to be treated fairly, because they've been ostracized from the positions that lead to senior leadership for generations now. We have to break that down, even while we turn the dials within the internal promotion and selection processes. And as the mayor mentioned, from top on down, a president selects the right people at the top to ensure those things do occur. It's a generational and it's a continual problem, and it's a great question you posed. Thank you. So our next question, and I hope I pronounce your name correctly, it is from Tony Reynes from Marina Del Rey.
I don't have my question in front of me, but
I will be happy to help you then.
Okay, probably better, because I will go on.
So your question, there is an extraordinary number of homeless veterans in this country. What would you do to assist members of the military as they transition to jobs, housing, family, and education? And thank you for that question, Tony.
So I've been working on this for a long time. I was actually the executive sponsor for the Ending Veterans Homelessness in 5 years in the Obama administration when I was at the VA, and we were able to make significant headway. And there were several things that had to be done. I'm just start off with homelessness, but I'm going to talk about other things as well. It started with switching the VA's policies from basically saying, hey, if you are homeless and you want help, or if you have a mental health crisis, or if you are need addiction counseling, in order for you to enter our treatment program, you must be clean and sober before you can go into residency treatment. It's the most ridiculous thing. People are on the streets because they couldn't find a job. They start self-medicating because they were not, because they don't have a job, or they have an undiagnosed TBI or PTSD diagnosed. They're not diagnosed. So they start self-medicating. Now they're asked for help, and you're like, well, we can't help you unless you stop the behavior. So we started this no wrong door approach, where any veteran can go in, and the first thing we do is reduction of harm, so that we get you into a place, we get you a bed, we get you into a treatment facility so you can get the help that you need. And then we started the HUD-VASH program, the HUD VA Supportive Housing Program, which is a grant program that provides rental assistance so that veterans can get into shelter for up to 2 years while they're undergoing treatment and get the help they need. That significantly cut the number of homeless veterans in this country. Unfortunately, within the first year of the Obama of the transfer from the Obama administration to the Trump administration, they tried to get rid of most of that HUD-VASH money, and we had to fight like, tooth and nail to get it back. So there's one aspect of it. The other is that we have to make sure veterans can get the jobs once they leave the military, and it starts before they leave, and it starts before your last year. It's why I introduced the Troop Talent Act, to make sure that when you're in the military, you are certified, that you receive civilian certification for the jobs you held in the military before you leave. I'll give you an example. When my husband took a transportation company to Operation Iraqi Freedom, his soldiers were driving tractor trailers up and down from Kuwait all the way into Baghdad and north. They were driving, and they each drove hundreds of thousands of miles over the road while getting attacked by the enemy, while fighting IEDs, having to fix their trucks by the side of the road. They had military driver's licenses for those military trucks, but when they came home, they didn't have a CDL. So when they tried to apply for a job at Walmart to be a tractor trailer driver, they were shown as having 0 miles driving experience, and then they had to use the GI Bill to go get a CDL when they'd already been driving military trucks. We should have gotten them that CDL while they were still in. It's the same with all sorts of other jobs in the military. crew chiefs should get the A&P license as soon as they finish training in the military. And you can name any number of job skills. And that way, when they come out, they can say, listen, I've been, I've had a CDL for the 4 years of my enlistment, and I drove 300,000 miles combat credited under that CDL. Now I can have that job. And so jobs is really critical. And then, of course, truly diagnosing and treating traumatic brain injuries, post-traumatic stress, military sexual trauma, and making sure that those supportive programs are there in the VA when our military men and women transition to the civilian life.
The Senator covered the waterfront of issues so well. Let me just try to illustrate one of the elements that she mentioned, which is how the homelessness fight works on the ground, thanks to the kinds of initiatives like the HUD-VASH program she was talking about. So here in Indiana today, we're marking the loss. Yesterday, we lost former Governor Joe Kernan, who was my predecessor here in South Bend as mayor, a real mentor. He was a POW in Vietnam, came back home, thankfully became mayor and then governor, and always had a deep passion for serving, in particular, those most vulnerable veterans who were experiencing homelessness. And yet from the 1980s, when he was mayor and established for the first time a full homeless center here in South Bend, to the time that I was mayor in the last decade, we continued to struggle with a number of veterans experiencing homelessness in the city. Where we really turned the corner was by applying that harm reduction approach that the senator talked about, to finally be in a position to be able to recognize that you can't expect somebody to conquer their toughest substance use or mental health issues before you can help them, that you have to put a roof over somebody's head in order to expect them to be able to conquer those issues. Now, the really frustrating thing was that so many of these veterans were by rights entitled to levels of support for housing and other benefits that they had earned, but were not getting connected up. And so when the Obama administration, including then Assistant Secretary Duckworth, challenged America to end veterans' homelessness, we heard that call here in our city and said, okay, what would it take to actually get to functional zero for veterans' homelessness in this community? We established a no barrier shelter, not just for veterans, but for those hardest to house cases. But in order to make that pencil out financially, part of what had to happen was to make sure that as we were getting people into those beds, the center could be reimbursed. That's what those HUD-VASH vouchers made possible. So I don't want it to sound like a bureaucratic alphabet soup sort of thing, because I can see the faces of the people who are in that facility getting the support they need. And occasionally we'll run into them and they'll be telling me about the new job that they've got. That's what it means to have the right kind of handshake between people on the ground solving this issue and people in Washington supporting our communities and getting it done. That's what we've lost under this administration. It's what will be restored under a Biden administration, and with leaders like Senator Duckworth in the Senate helping make sure that those funds are protected and, we hope, expanded.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Senator. One point I'll make for 2 cents on this question. The Biden plan with regard to veterans does include also there's the importance of programs and funding, but it's also about the internal, and if I can use the analogy, the blocking and tackling of the execution of the operations of the Department of Veterans Affairs in hiring all the positions that have been approved, whether they be in homeless programs, treatment programs, and in the health areas as well. There's an astounding number of unfilled positions, and taking care of that internal work will enable these proven programs to be even more effective than they have been in the past. And a President Biden will prioritize that. We're going to squeak in a final question, and it is by Virgil Kane from Cave Creek, Arizona.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Virgil.
Hi, how are you? I'm guilty of not writing it down either, because I never expected to get called on. Do you mind reading it?
Who's the lovely lady behind you on the couch?
That's my wife, Marcy. She's a supporter of veterans issues, not a veteran herself, but she's my wife, an old Navy veteran from Vietnam.
Hi, Marcy.
Her name is Marcy.
Hi, Marcy. Thanks for supporting all of our vets, and especially that one in your house.
Absolutely.
I've sent off a number of questions. If you'd be so kind to read it, I'd appreciate it.
It would be my pleasure, sir. The question we have for you is, does Vice President Biden have a plan to stop deporting those who have served in our military once their
Oh, yes.
service is over and they're deported? I feel they've served our country and should have a path to citizenship based on their service. I know there's a fairly large contingent of veterans deported and live in Tijuana, Mexico. I'm sure there are other locations also. Thank you for your question, Virgil. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I remember now. That's very important. There's a huge thousands of people living right across the border in Mexico that have no rights because they've been deported and they serve their country, our country.
Yep. Well, I spent Veterans Day with them last year, so I know. I've actually introduced several pieces of legislation, and if we flip the Senate and we get control of the Senate, and we get President Biden, my legislation would pass. And my legislation has several components to it. The first of which is if you enlist in the military, then you immediately get a temporary green card. And at the end of your first tour, of your first enlistment, if you have anything other than a dishonorable discharge, if you served honorably, you get a permanent green card. You become a citizen at the end of your tour of duty. Because I figure there's no greater way to show your patriotism and love of this nation than to wear her uniform and be willing to die to protect and defend her Constitution. So if you serve those 4 years honorably, you get to be a citizen at the end of that 4 years. It would allow those veterans who are currently deported to apply and get into the program and get back into the country with a special visa so that they can access the benefits that they earn and are entitled to, but can't access, like VA. So many of these guys have undiagnosed post-traumatic stress, they have undiagnosed burn pit exposure, lung conditions, they have Agent Orange. There's a lot of Vietnam veterans over there. They can't get access to VA healthcare, which they've earned and are entitled to because they're across the border. So this would allow them to come back in for treatment and allow them to get a temporary reprieve and apply for a green card and stay in the country. It's really shocking. I was over there. I met veterans who were deported because they got a DUI. Can you imagine, after serving for 10, 15 years, to get a DUI? And sometimes the DUI was because they were self-medicating because they were not diagnosed with post-traumatic stress. So we have a plan for what needs to be done, and it can be done under a Biden administration.
Okay, so that concludes the question and answer. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions, and thank you to everyone who's joined us here today. Even though everyone spent money to be here with us, it's now my job to put the hook into you once again. I thought I'd stayed away from a career in sales when I wouldn't work the register at Arby's 40 years ago, but here I am. So the request is, if anybody, since you're here because you care about Vice President Biden becoming President Biden, and you're also interested in our veterans and military families. So if you would like to receive updates on the veterans and military families issues that the Biden campaign works on as we move through the next 96 days to victory, you can please text VMF, or as we say, Victor Mike Foxtrot, VMF to 30330, and you'll get updates on veterans and military affairs from the Biden campaign. So now it's my time to say thank you to everyone. It's a pleasure to have been here. It's an honor to have been here. And I'd like to thank both Senator Duckworth, Mayor Buttigieg, as I gesture at my screen, to you both. Thank you both for being here with us, and for parting remarks from Senator Duckworth.
Oh, just thank you to everyone. And I'm so grateful that you're doing this. In addition to contributing to the Biden campaign, call 5 people, make sure they get registered to vote, and make sure that they do vote, and make sure they have a plan to vote, because that's how we're going to win.
Mr. Mayor?
Well, thank you again, Sean. Thank you, Senator, for everything that you're doing. Thank you to everybody who's part of this. Look, we know what we have to do. We've got less than 100 days, and this is a matter of national security, not one of partisan advantage. We have got to do right by those who protect this country, and that obligation lasts a lifetime. So please do everything you can. I know you've already been digging deep Please keep doing that. Find ways to spread the word, rope everybody you know into this, and don't hesitate to let those in your life who are tuning out or cynical, don't hesitate to let them know that a good way, if they honor your service, to do so would be to honor your plea that they remain involved, that they vote and volunteer, and ensure that those who serve have a better commander-in-chief as soon as possible.
Thank you, everyone.